couple things to keep in mind. First off, I would limit your sources to 4 to 6. And we talked about a little bit this morning based on a question. 6 is about the highest I would ever go, and that's for high schoolers. Because for kids to keep distinct documents together and to be able to go back to their notes and refer to them and to build that argument, after you get about 6, it all blends together and they can't distinguish and they start to forget. You can run some great historical investigations with 2 sources. You could do it with 3, depending upon how you pick and choose. We talked about vocabulary, adapting them for length. I have always lived by a rule that I invented myself. It's called the flip rule, and I discovered it. When kids get a paper, the first thing they do is flip it. If the words go on the back, it's too long. If the words stop on the bottom of the front, they're like, okay. And so I work the flip rule with my kids. Some keep it to 250 words. Some chunk it into no more than 2 paragraphs. You know your kids. You have to make those decisions about where they are and how you shorten for length. Also think about things outside of text. Music lyrics, political cartoons, sculpture, artifacts, I missed one, artwork, all of those things are sources that historians use to interpret the past. Look for ways to incorporate them into your instruction. You'd be amazed at what happens when you pull out a political cartoon from the late 19th century that are very, very involved and often very, very colorful to use in the classroom. We mentioned making sure that you provide the context of the sources. You have to think about, do I pick sources that all agree, sources that all disagree? How do I build that collection of sources? And one of the things your kids will want to do is tell you, well, it's 3, 4, and 3 against, so it's a tie. I can't come up with an answer. It's not math. Not every source is created equally, and just because it's opposed to something, you have to look at who's saying it and why they're saying it. And then can the source be edited without altering its meaning? We talked a little bit about that this morning as well. The key thing is to remember that all the evidence you use, all the sources that you use, are created in a certain period of time in a different place. And you have to get kids to realize that we're looking at stuff that dead people wrote, made, created, listened to, and help them to understand that it exists there. The other one that I'll bring you comes from England. There are several 4-letter words you can't use in my classroom, but one is bias. The English, who moved in this direction beginning in the late 60s and 70s, for the first 15 or 20 years, their national exams were always having kids look for bias. What's the bias of the source? What's the bias of the source? Why is this source biased? And what they found is that when kids hear the word bias, they think the source is useless and they won't use it. They just push it aside. Kids don't realize that every single source has a perspective. There is no perfect source. They all have perspective. And so what the English started doing was substituting the word bias for either perspective or point of view. And so I kind of police that word in my classroom because I see it as well. They'll say, that source is biased, we can't use it. And of course my response is, oh, you found one without a perspective. It doesn't exist. And so it's one of those roadblocks that you can eliminate to help kids be successful. And then finally, we move in this idea towards tying everything to the central question. What I'll leave you with is my central argument that I made this morning. We have 100 years of data that say history is not in decline, so don't let them tell you that history is in decline. Grandpa was no brighter than you are. We do have data that says it's consistently low, and nothing has changed it because we haven't altered the way that we teach it, and too many of our constituents find it boring. And one of the metrics I'm looking at is online education. The largest number of courses taken on online education, anybody want to guess what subject? History and social studies. which means we are the easiest to be replaced. If we don't change our practice, it's already shown that we can be replaced, and many, many people would rather get it from the computer who just spits out a story and they spit it back. So it's really incumbent upon us to change our practice to save our discipline. We've just gone through a 12-year period under No Child Left Behind where our discipline was marginalized across the country, eliminated in elementary schools, turned into electives in middle schools, tests dropped in high schools. We were marginalized. And if we keep doing it the same way, my fear is we're going to be replaced with an algorithm. And I'm a lot funnier than an algorithm, and so are you. So you want to keep that job.